Welcome to another episode of A Come Together. Here we are. It is Monday, and what a Monday it has been. Oh my goodness. Whew. Monday came, gave me an uppercut right to the jaw. That was crazy. But you gotta turn crazy days around as soon as you have the space to do it, as soon as you have the time, as soon as you have the license, as soon as the rest of the professional world and all the other calls to responsibility that occupy us for 12, 15, 18 hours a day fade off for the night, for us to be able to just take the couple of precious hours or minutes that we have and really choose what to do with it. So here we go. It's getting better. Today's getting better. I actually started today phenomenally. I took my first jujitsu class, which was a lot funnier than it sounds. And anyone that knows me knows exactly how funny that sounds. And it went about exactly as you would imagine if you know me. If you don't know me, it was comical. Very funny. I'm kind of sore, I think. I can't tell whether I'm sore or somehow injured from some other event that happened in the last couple of days. But I had a bunch of things on my mind. This is the first time I'm doing three solo podcast episodes in a row. And that is because I've decided to leave most of my friends alone and stop badgering them to join the podcast and primarily start primarily start recording with professionals that want to that want to talk with me. And as always, if you do want to record with me, I'm always happy. Just shoot me a text or send me a message, send me an email, and follow, whatever it is. And I'm always happy to record with everyone. I had a bunch of thoughts in my mind the last couple of days, and it's been percolating for a couple of weeks, really. And I want to just kind of talk it out a little bit and hopefully see if I can try to use the come together philosophy and language to try to make a point that I think is going to that is probably not too popular, and I hope not to what's the word for it? Not to not upsetting to most of my friends and family. And that is that based on at least the online space of Twitter and Instagram, or X and Instagram, and the podcast sphere, I am very nervous for the future of at least the future of America's relationship to Israel. And I think that unfortunately I think that it's being exaggerated by a lot of people who, some with good intentions and some out of sheer stupidity. And I wanted to at least just get some thoughts out and clarify a couple of things. First of all, I love Israel. I love the country. I am deeply connected to it. I spent a lot of time there. I would be very happy to live there at some point in the future. It is, as it, it's my, I consider it part of, I consider it my homeland, and I consider it to be to be an amazing place. And my family, my grandmother's family came from Yemen, from persecution in Yemen, and found a place to live there, and built a family, built a home, and built really generations and generations of good, hardworking, family-oriented people that are just really, really wonderful. And of course, like everyone, no, like every place, not every country is perfect, and not every population is perfect, and there's some better apples and some worse apples. Um, just in general, that's. blanket statement, and I think that everyone could kind of agree that every group of people, take 10 people in a room, or take 100 people in a room, or take 10,000 or 10 million people, and you get some good apples, you get some bad apples. I don't think, it's too crazy to say. Um, the There's been a lot of talk lately, and speculation. Some of it seems to be a little bit more conspiratorial. Some of it seems to be, which is a little unpleasant and a little discomforting, a little bit less than conspiratorial and a little bit more close to reality about certain about Israel's relationship with some of the darker side of society in the world. The Epsteins, or whatever the Mossad does, whatever the Secret Service does, and there's speculation on podcasts, and there's speculation on online, on Twitter, X, there's speculation on Instagram, there's speculation obviously on TikTok. It's obviously spiked enormously since October 7th, and for some reason, it appears that all the people that are trying to defend Israel cannot seem to come up with a more eloquent or articulate response to all of these, um, conspiracies. And again, when I say conspiracies, I'm not saying this in the negative sense of the word. I'm not saying this to discredit anything. A conspiracy literally just means like an unofficial narrative, and that's not a officially recognized narrative. And there, I mean, we know how many conspiracies or conspiracy theories in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, have been right with just the passing of time. And as time goes on, a little bit more truth comes out. And as people die out, and as the implications for what would have happened to select individuals, as that ceases to be relevant, that, information becomes more publicly acknowledged or well known. There's been quite a bit. And so when I say conspiracy, I'm really not trying to say this in a discrediting way. I'm just saying this as an unofficial narrative. But there's been a lot of conspiracies about Israel's involvement in various American affairs, various global affairs, and unfortunately, again, the only thing that people that the primary thing that people are responding is, "You're an anti-Semite, shut up. You're a Nazi, shut up." And the problem with that is that, and I don't know whether, the people that that are responding like this have lived under a rock for the last 10, 15 years, but that has been historically, or, and historically has been recently, a tactic used by people that are trying to cover up conspiracies, specifically the left in the last 5 years, or the far left in the last 5 years, and or the last 10 years, and and it's been used to cover up conspiracies by just calling people names and shouting racist, shouting anti-Semite, shouting bigot, shouting dangerous, shouting "don't say this," deplatform, and like you would think that after the boiling point of the of Trump's third election run, that people would learn better and say, "Hey, man, I heard what you said, and I think that you're a little confused, and let me explain why." Or, "Hey, man, hey, Candace Owens, or hey, whoever it is, I totally see why you think what you think. Let's talk about it and have a conversation about it. And let's also make sure to clarify and emphasize," and I don't think that people are saying this enough, that when you say Israel, that doesn't mean all of Israel, just like when you say America doesn't mean all of America. When you say Israel, it's talking about a select number of bad apples that may or may not have done anything. And I don't know. I'm not privy to any kind of information more than anyone else. Um, but for example, and the problem is that it's really infesting the people that are calling these same loud voices, that are calling everyone anti-Semites and calling everyone bigots and calling everyone Nazis and pro-Holocaust and whatever it is. Those same voices are the ones that make that have a negative influence on Israel and Jews' reputations alike, and are not doing any favors to people that don't know any better. For example, I was just the other day I was talking to a friend of mine, and he mentioned to me, he was like, "Oh, did you listen to the Rogan episode where he had that anti-Semite on?" And I mean, I'd listened to a couple of Rogan episodes last week, and I didn't catch any of them being anti-Semites, but I knew obviously immediately what he was talking about, and he was talking about his episode with Ian Carroll, where they talk about some conspiracy theories about the what about different about Israel's potential involvement in various affairs. And as someone and I said, "Well, did you listen to the episode?" He's like, "No." I said, "Well, I listened to it, and I think that it's really important to know that Ian Carroll kept saying 100 times, like, I'm not saying this applies to every Jew. I'm not calling Jews bad. I'm not calling Israel evil. I'm saying there are particular individuals that have done this, and there's a paper trail that looks like particular individuals have done this, and that doesn't look very good." I mean, that's almost verbatim what he said, but he went out of his way, probably maybe between 5 and 10 times on the episode, and then separately on his X account, and just kept on saying, like, I'm not saying that I'm calling Jews pedophiles. I'm not calling Jews evil. He goes, I'm not calling a whole group of people anything. And that's, and he goes, there's one person I have a problem with. I have a problem with Bibi. I have a problem with particular historical figures that may or may that there are documents or paper trails, whatever, of things that they've said or done that doesn't look very good, and I'm going to call that out. And whether now there's a whole nother side to the argument, and that side of the argument is, okay, well, how come you feel like calling out Israel as opposed to all the other corrupt places in the world, all the other corrupt places in South America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in China, and what about all those? What about the concentration camps that they have in China? Like, what are you going to say about those? And obviously, that's a great point, but that's also not a response to if someone attacks. The yeah, but response is a response that has already proven itself to not only be ineffective, but also proven itself to actually get people to dislike you. And I remember I was, I mean, just a couple of I was talking before the election to friends and family, and we were talking about Trump, and I was saying, I was like, I don't know. This time, it just doesn't even feel like it's going to be close. Like, it doesn't even feel like it's going to be even close to a win. And they're like, why not? And I said, well, because if you just put your finger on the pulse of society, if you just go to the top 10 most listened podcasts, which reach far more, which have a far greater reach um, than any news or any poll or whatever it is, then or any corporate media center or any institution, if you just go to those, if you just look at the activity on X, if you just look at the activity online on Twitter, on Instagram, you're certain to find that it doesn't even feel close. Like, it doesn't even feel like people are like, I don't I maybe here and there, but that you'd find rhetoric for Kamala Harris or for the modern Democratic Party or for Gavin Newsom or whoever it is, but far and few between. And the ones that were at this point were primarily doing the same kind of gaslighting and name calling that a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Israel people that are that think that they're protecting Israel and defending Israel are doing online now, and that's not good. It's not good to repeat the behavior of a failed political campaign. It's not good behavior to repeat behavior of a failed liberal failed not liberal failed political party forever. You know, it's not why are we gonna lower ourselves to those standards? And again, you have a if you like it is so much more eloquent and is so much more like right now. It feels like a lot of the world, even if posts are BS or podcasts are BS, even if they're full of shit, even if they're full of crap, if you take the time to explain a point and you take it time and you take the effort to expand on an idea, whether your idea is right or ultimately wrong, you give yourself an enormous amount of credit by taking the time and taking the opportunity to say, hey, here's what's the case. There's a lot of different sides to this. There's a lot of different, there's a lot of information going around. I can only speak to what I know. I'm going to be as honest and going to be as transparent as possible. And this is what I know. This is what I don't know. And this is an argument that I have. And this is an argument that I think is a silly argument. And this is the case. And this is not the case. For example, and, I mean, just again, just to provide a case for case in point, I was listening to Theo Vaughn's podcast with Candace Owens last week because I haven't really listened to her, and I haven't listened to her very much at all. And I found that Theo Vaughn is a pretty thoughtful kind of host, and he gets things right sometimes, he gets things wrong sometimes, and he's silly and he's funny and he's goofy and he's emotional, and he's got a lot of really wonderful traits and wonderful episodes and wonderful guests. And I saw that a lot of Jews, a lot of pro-Israel people, were really blasting Candace Owens for the last couple of years, really, right? And some things, and I didn't really get what the whole thing was about, but I kind of just got the impression that she seems, there's conspiracy theories, and then there's kind of like maybe pushing the envelope on conspiracies a little bit and kind of towing the line into less than like you can like provide 1 + 1 = 2, and then now that you have the audience now that you and the audience are on the same page, you can agree that 1 + 1 = 2. You're going to go ahead and you're going to try to sneak in 2 + 2 = 5, and you're going to hope at the fact that people, because they trust you, the fact that you were sound with your first logic, the 1 + 1 = 2, you're going to hope that now they say, okay, well, yeah, you're also right. Maybe 2 + 2 does equal 5. And no, it doesn't. And so one of the things that they were talking about was the wars in the Middle East from the early 2000 from 2000s to the mid 2010s ish, right? Or even till today, really, because that's really what most of the war in the world has been revolved around, and or at least that America's been involved in. And she made a point. She was like, and you have the Middle East, and who's the only person to benefit from America getting involved in war in the Middle East? And that's Israel. It was her takeaway. Now, I'm sure that Israel certainly benefited from having American allies in the Middle East, and helping fight terrorism, or some terrorists and some not. Um, but America, it's not like America has nothing to gain from being involved. I mean, if you want to say that there was a group of people that for example, that the oil land or the control over oil or minerals or the wealth that the Middle East has, if and particular people or particular industries were incentivizing and pushing for us to be involved in wars with Israel to become wealthy because of the oil and minerals and other opportunities for to create wealth in the Middle East, great. But then take it all the way. Now that you said 1 + 1 = 2, you can't like like you're trying to feed this narrative that America had absolutely nothing to benefit from the Middle East. I don't know that I buy that. I don't know that I believe that. And so me speaking this whole train of thought out loud is, I think, what we need a little bit more of in the world. And actually, I think Theo Von did a really good job pushing back on her, on Candace Owens, for a couple of things that she said. And some things she went back on, and some things she, stood her ground on. And she's totally entitled to her opinions and to say whatever she wants. And I don't listen. I would be surprised if she was a raging anti-Semite, like everyone's making, like the whole online community is making her seem. But I certainly, after listening to that 2-hour podcast, did not walk away and say, wow, that's a woman that just is a vile woman that hates Jews in Israel. Like I was very, very far from that impression. So, to have to say, hey, I think I hear where you're coming from with some of it. I would like to just make a couple of points about a couple other things that you said, and maybe we can all come to maybe a better understanding together. That's really been the way to succeed in the last 4 or 5 years, in the last 6, 7 years. Since long form content, since long form podcasts, since long form posts on Twitter, um, that weren't just a matter of 100 characters or less, but real like thoughtful posts, like that maybe like a guy like Bill Ackman posts. It's actually funny because he's subject to the same attacks, right? He'll have these amazing, beautifully written, articulate and eloquent thoughts, and he'll make a lot of really reasonable points, and the responses are to call him a blind, a Zionist tool. I mean, to call him, a Trump buddy, and I mean, call whatever you want to call him. Kaylee Means is another example of someone that's been doing that too, and the responses are just to call them names, and everyone in America knows it's nonsense. Everyone that's reading these posts know that when you don't have anything good to respond to someone, you call them names. I had another friend that I was talking to, and I asked him about JD Vance and what he thinks of him, because I thought, I kind of keep on going back and forth on him. I think overall he's very good. I think that he has a little bit more formal, like he's a little bit more of like a slickster politician, I think, than what I would be necessarily comfortable with. But I think that he's got that really cool modern day perspective, or I guess persona and vibe about him that is just really, really like he's both cool and intelligent and composed and he doesn't bullshit so much, and then when he does, he kind of like sneaks it in or laces it in somewhere, and so it's hard to get completely behind him, but I think that I think that he's someone that I definitely would rather have on I'd rather have on the right than on the left, I think, at this point. I think that he's got a little bit more of that like typical conservative perspective, and that typical politician. He has a political rhetoric that, and at the same time, he's kind of also like, I can imagine being that cool uncle that's like good at sports, could talk sports at the table and like hang out with you. And So I asked this friend, what do you think of JD? And his response was, I hate him. And I don't really know anyone, left or right, that hates JD Vance, because he's a respectable, like, again, say, whether you like his politics or not, like the fact that he worked so hard, came from the background he came from, really came out of the blue as Trump's VP, stepped into the spotlight, really carried the weight throughout the election cycle. And because of that, and he is like almost objectively an admirable kind of guy. Like he comes from an admirable place, and and his life is inspirational, and his story is inspirational. And I was shocked. I was like, "You hate him?" I was like, "Have you ever heard him speak?" He's like, "No." I was like, "So how do you hate him?" He's like, "I saw that podcast. I saw the interview. I saw that that clip on Twitter or on X with when he was yelling at Zelensky." And I was like, so you, it's like the guy goes on 500 podcasts, does all these long form interviews, has a vice presidential debate on national TV. You don't watch any of it, and then you're gonna tell me that you hate a guy based on a 3.5 minute clip that you saw online. I was like, okay, I mean, whatever, and I don't walk away from that experience thinking more highly of that opinion. I walk away from that experience saying, how can you, I shaking my head and being like, what is that all about? And the really, and the point is that, that I think that Jews and people that are pro-Israel and Israelis and whoever it is online that are acting hysterical. And by the way, if they really feel threatened, I understand that too. Like it's in Jewish history to be persecuted. It's ingrained in our blood that this happens all the time. We you grow up every year or multiple times a year around any kind of Jewish cultural events, and the emphasis is always on all the times that we've been attacked and destroyed. And it's only been like 75 years since we've been last persecuted on a mass level, and everyone's acting like it happened 5,000 years ago. And I'm like, we have such a short collective memory, and or the rest of the world does at least, that I could really understand why people are upset. But what I think we need to do just a little bit better is I think we really just need to be more nuanced. We can't walk around we can't go online screaming hysterically and you know, not only brainwashing our own people, not only brainwashing our own followers, because not everyone listens to every Joe Rogan episode that comes out, and not everyone listens to every minute of every 3 hour episode every 3 hour podcast that comes out. And so when some schmuck, again, I hate when people do this, post a minute and a half clip out of a 3 hour conversation and say, Jews are the worst. Because he says that Jews are the worst because Epstein was a Jew, and Epstein was linked with Mossad, and you're like, so the state of Israel sucks, and he didn't say that, and you're not doing anyone any kind of favors. You're not doing yourself. You're not doing Jews. And you're not doing the people that like or hate Israel any favors by behaving like this. So that was that's just a little bit of a tangent of really what's been on my mind. I think that we could be a lot more eloquent, and I hope to be. And I hope that you can make points like this, like that point I made earlier with Candace. If I have a particular issue with something she says, point out the issue. Don't call people names, for God's sake. We're not 10. We're not 5 years old. And if someone's really an anti-Semite, s- save it for when they're really anti-Semitic. If someone's a racist, save it for when they're really racist, because otherwise, by overextending the use of the word, you take out the value in it. You take out what the word really means. So, that was just some ideas or some thoughts from the top of my head. But I guess in conjunction with this idea, or kind of related to this idea, we have the Jewish holiday of Purim coming up, and Purim is my favorite holiday. For anyone that doesn't know, it's a combination of, in secular terms, I guess, or non-Jewish terms, I guess you would say that it's a combination of Halloween and St. Patty's Day. And it's dress up, drink a lot, eat a lot, it's a commandment, a mitzvah, obligation to drink and get drunk, and particularly on wine. And everyone dresses up in different costumes. Some are cute, some are less cute. Some are political. Some are cute and family themed. Some are cheesy. They're really great. There's actually, obviously, aside from just the way that the manifestation of the celebration, you also have a you also have an enormous amount of philosophical depth and implications that the day carries. And in Jewish holidays, I know that comedians and other Jews and people will often laugh and be like, okay, like the Jewish holiday schedule goes, X tried to kill us, the Greeks or the Romans or the Persians tried to kill us and they didn't, and now let's party. But each kind of holiday had their own different agenda, and the way that and each attack on Judaism was kind of done differently, right? So for example, this Purim story is about the destruction. Historically it's between the first and second temple, around I think the second temple was built or destroyed around the year 70 AD. So year 70. So this probably was maybe 50, 60 years before that, 100 years before that, within a generation or two of that. And there was a decree and there was a story of this guy Haman, who convinced the king at the time. He paid him off. He gave him he bribed him and said, and the story of the king was that this Babylonian king had actually overtaken the empire. He was a stable boy in for previous king Nebuchadnezzar, and he staged a coup. And as a stable boy, he collected enough political favor and enough military favors and built up enough resentment to overthrow the king, and he began to reign. And and the whole story, I mean, there's a lot of different lenses that you could look at the story. It's a super, super fascinating story. It's a story about actually women and feminism, which is really cool. And people forget about that, obviously, very conveniently when they talk about how Judaism is sexist, even though there are so many, countless examples of ways that it's not. It's a story of feminism. It's a story of um, of intentionality when it comes to people's relationship with religion and God, and how because the story is about at a point in time where we didn't have revealed obvious miracles, like there wasn't lightning coming out of the sky and striking down enemies, but and indeed the whole story actually does not contain God's name in it one time, which is pretty crazy. Considering that Jewish, I mean the story I think has 10 chapters in it and doesn't mention God's name once. It's just about the story of what happened to the people. It's really a political story, which is super interesting. And there's a lot of different philosophies and perspectives. So this guy, and so this new king, who's obviously insecure, is now ruling over 127 different provinces, ranging from essentially what is now Africa to the Middle East, and he doesn't really know how to rule this kingdom, and he wants to just do what will essentially kind of keep him in power for as long as possible. And at a certain point, one of the henchmen, I guess, or one of his advisors, who hated the Jews, of course, said to him, "Hey, man, listen, we have a lot of problems, or it looks like you could have some problems in the future. It's a really good idea to get on top of this and to kind of look for a scapegoat for people to blame for when things go bad." Kind of sounds a little bit like there's some echoes in modern day history, but your society is kind of you're it's not, I wouldn't say it's falling apart, but you don't have a strong grip on your kingdom right now. If you find a group of people to blame, then everyone can kind of organize together, rally around, and kill those people. And then look at you like you're the hero that just saved the day, and now everyone could kind of unite over their hatred and destruction of the Jews. And that's the story, or that's at least the premise of the story. And it's a really, really interesting premise. And there's a particular point that I want to discuss and get to, and it actually I think will tie together this whole podcast episode. And that is that within the tribe of Israel, when in ancient biblical times, there were 12 different tribes. There were originally 10. Then one of them had two. One of them gave one of the brothers gave his two sons the future. He kind of split up his land amongst his two sons and said, okay, instead of being 10, now there'll be 12. And there are 12 tribes, and there was one tribe called the Kohanim, or the priests, and they were specifically supposed to be separate from the rest of the people. They didn't get a portion of land in Israel. They, when in the in the biblical text, when the Jews came from Egypt back to Israel, they divvied up the land based on the tribes, and the priests did not get any kind of portion of land. Instead of getting a portion of land, they were actually the recipients of a 10% tax that everyone had to pay, and that's actually still irrelevant. That's still a relevant law till today. It doesn't necessarily go to the priests, but there is a notion to give 10% of your money, of your income, to charity or back to God, and that's actually one of really the more beautiful aspects, in my opinion, or of Judaism, is and we and we and the philosophy and the perspective goes that this money wasn't yours to begin with. God had given you a blessing that you can earn a living, that you were healthy and strong or intelligent or capable or lucky or whatever it is. And to show your appreciation, you give 10% back to the people and 10% back to the community and 10% back. But the other aspect, or the other purpose of the priests was to represent the Jewish people for their sins and atone for them, apologize for them, and to educate them and to be educators. And what's really interesting, at least, from my perspective, I hope that's interesting to you too, but what's really interesting to me from my perspective is that there is a value in having, even within a family or even within a community, even within a sect, a country, a group of people that remain separate from the rest of them, because at a certain point, and I think that this is super important, at a certain point, if you're in the middle of a scene, of a game, of an experience, if you're in the midst of the experience, it's really, really, really hard for you to take a step back and be objective. It's really, really hard for you to take a step back and say, for example, like myself today, I had a super, super challenging day. Last couple of days in terms of work, last couple of work days, last couple of professional days. Work has been a little challenging for me recently. My time has been spread very thin. I haven't had the opportunity to prepare classes quite to the extent that I would like to. And I felt like I was really falling behind, both in terms of sales and in terms of teaching, and in terms of the podcast. I kind of beat myself up about the fact that I have 3 solo episodes out in a row, and um, and it's very and I can't pretend that I didn't. I got in like a slump. You get in your head and you get tired and upset and just worn down and battered, and it's really, really hard to take a step back and say, hey man, this is just a day. Like this is it's just a day in your life. You're gonna be okay. Like you've made it through harder things, you've made it through hard times. Worse things have happened to a lot worse people. You have so many wonderful things. It's hard to do that when you're in the middle of a moment, you know? And and there is a guy, the hero, I guess, or one of the heroes, the almost hero of the Purim story, the male almost hero, because Esther was the feminine hero, or the female hero rather. Um, Esther Hadassah was the female hero, but there was a guy, her uncle, named Mordechai, and he was a judge that spoke allegedly 70 languages, according to the biblical texts and according to the scholars and the sages, and he was able, and the whole story, he's kind of a main character, but he's also kind of in the background in terms of the actual series of events that occur. And he almost kind of feels like a Jiminy Cricket kind of character, in the sense that he's kind of perked on everyone's shoulder and kind of whispering, follow your conscience, do the right thing, do the good thing, do this, do that, make sure that everything's kind of going okay. And he kind of holds himself to be, he places himself, his role is to be involved in the story, but to kind of take a step out and be able to look at the big picture of the whole story and help the narrative along. And I don't think it's absolutely no coincidence that he also happens to be a judge. And a judge, ideally in a healthy working society, is actually supposed to have that same responsibility as what Mordechai and the priests, the tribe of priests that called Levi, that the Jews had or have, and that is to and the job of a judge is to take a step back, look at the whole picture, and determine where someone or something belongs. Two people come together, they're fighting, they're arguing about land, they're arguing about who's right, who's wrong. You did this to me, you did that to me. I'm really upset. You owe me this, you owe me that. And both of them are so caught up in the moment that they actually need someone to come and take a step back and say, hey, man, whoa, like I know you're feeling a lot. I know you're going through a lot. I know that I don't know what it's like to be you. But from the outside looking in, man, I think that, it was, whether you meant it or not, it was really your fault. Or, the responsibility is on him or her, or whatever it is. And to kind of be that objective person. And, um, and I think that we all kind of need that in our lives. And I don't know that we necessarily, that I don't think that this is a value or something that we really look for or emphasize. And it's really a shame, I mean, and you don't really, I mean, unfortunately, even in America, at least in the last 5, 10 years, you really haven't seen too much, an enormous amount of that either, especially if it comes to political matters. But even otherwise, I mean, like what we say about our justice system is that it sucks, but it's not the worst, and like that's not really a great way to look at it. But people are still people, and even judges are subject, obviously, to not being objective. But you have to keep them. You have to give them a reason to be objective. You have to give them you have to keep them satisfied. You have to keep them healthy. You have to keep them supported, and but I think that we also need that, I mean, I know that I certainly do, that in a moment like, in moments like today for myself, where you have hard times or you have challenging times or frustrating or just you can't, like, you just feel like the whole day just beat the crap out of you. And you're so tired and you don't know what happened, to be able to have either a friend or a technique. For me, for example, it's writing. A lot of times I'll write letters to myself about things that I'm experiencing or going through, and I'll always make sure I'll be very raw and very open and very honest about my experience. I am disappointed in myself today. I'm disappointed in myself today because I didn't put in effort and I took the easy way out for a lot of things, or I wasted X amount of time and I shouldn't have, or I didn't I treated my wife or kid not as well, or I treated myself badly, or whatever it is. And and then I always have to end on like an outside note looking in. But you've always handled this, and you've always handled moments like this, and this is just another one that you'll be okay with, or maybe you do need to do some work and think about it. Let's revisit in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And I think that the only thing that we could do is just feel better. If the more that we do that, the more manageable our lives are, but also the more willing we are to hear advice, welcome opinions that aren't necessarily, our own, and we have more space to be nuanced and subtle. And I think that that's a really, really valuable and important idea. So I'm going to leave it there. I I should have more episodes coming up. Again, I'm sorry that this is the third solo episode in a row. I've had people pushing me off, but I hope to have a lot of fun episodes coming out soon. So we will see you a couple more times this week, I hope. Good night, everyone.